Chapter 16. 17-year-old Mickey Radford wanted to be an astronaut. Not just one of the guys who flew to and from the moon like some kind of space stewardess. He wanted to be a primo astronaut. He wanted to be a pilot. He had a shot too. If he could get that Rockwell scholarship to the Norcross Academy, he'd manage to get himself out of old Detroit and on the road to space in a hurry. If he blew the Rockwell tests next week, he might as well forget his plans for the future. He'd wind up working in this shell station all his life. Right now, it wasn't so bad working the graveyard shift. Most people were too scared to come out this late at night, so he wound up being more of a babysitter for the station instead of a pump boy. The job gave him a quiet place to study too. Mickey sat in the attendant's booth, concentrating on his analytic geometry textbook. He didn't notice the mud-caked grey motorcycle roaring into the station. It was only when the driver tapped on the booth that Mickey looked up. The feral little cycler wouldn't have distracted Mickey at all if it wasn't for the gun barrel of the Mac-10 that the guy shoved into the change slot of the booth. "Gimme all your money, bookworm, or I'll blow your brains out," Emil sneered. Mickey gaped at the gun barrel. Was this really happening? Jesus, he'd seen reports about self-service robberies on the news and stuff, but this station, in the middle of nowhere, on a weeknight, when he had the Rockwell exams next week? The sneer turned into a snarl. "Come on, zithead," Emil said. "Get a move on." Mickey quickly emptied the cash drawer into the change slide and pushed the money towards Emil. Emil glanced at the cash. Only a couple of hundred. "A slow night," Mickey explained. Emil trained the gun on the shaking teenager. "Now, fill it up on number 7. Mickey began punching buttons for the number 7 pump as Emil backed towards the bike. The numbers on the automated pump whirled down to 0. A badly rusted robotic arm inserted the gas nozzle into Emil's bike and began pumping fuel dutifully. Emil kept his eye on the kid in the glass booth. "I'm a good shot, punk," Emil bragged. "So don't do anything stupid. I could give you a third nostril from here." Keeping the gun trained on the booth, he grabbed a cigarette out of a pack he kept tucked in his shirt pocket and lit it with his free hand. Emil didn't hear the faint whine of an approaching car. He was having too much fun giving the attendant a bad time. He stood under the light provided by the shell sign, grinning evilly. "Hey man, what are you reading in there?" Mickey slowly held up his textbook, smiling like an idiot. Emil squinted his eyes, reading the book's title. "You a college boy or something?" he asked. "I bet you think you're pretty smart. Yeah, a regular wise guy. You think you can outsmart a bullet?" Emil laughed, a high-pitched wheeze. A pair of heavily armored boots approached him. Emil took a long drag on his cigarette. Crunch. Someone was behind him. He pivoted his torso, gun still in hand, and came face to face with Robocop. Robo's gun was already drawn and trained on Emil's heart. Robo stared impassively at the wiry thug. "Drop it," he commanded. Emil's jaw flapped up and down. It was the mechanical man from the boob tube. His cigarette glided to the ground. His eyes darted wildly back and forth. There had to be a way out of this. Robo stared hard at the man. There was something about his face, about the eyes, about the way he held his gun. He dismissed the thoughts. Dead or alive, either way, you're coming with me. Emil's face lost its colour. He had heard those words before. He remembered when and where. He squinted his eyes, trying to see beneath Robocop's armour. He shook his head from side to side, as if recovering from a left hook. You? Emil panicked, letting loose a spray of bullets. The bullets ricocheted wildly off Robo's armour. Emil squeezed the trigger of his MAC-10 a second time, sending a torrent of hot lead in Robo's direction. The thug dove behind the line of gas pumps for cover, as the rebounding bullets headed his way. 3 of the gas pumps were shredded by the slugs. A feed hose burst open with a twang, sending a spray of gas into the ground. Mickey, in the attendant's booth, took his book and his notes and ran out the door, as far away from the pumps as he could get. "Mister!" he yelled to Robo. "You'd better split!" Gas sprayed wildly from the ruptured pumps. Emil backed away from Robo and towards his bike, firing wildly. Half of the round smashed into the remaining pumps, sending fountains of gas gushing into the air. "Shit!" he concluded, watching a small river of gas lap up and over his foot. Robo watched both the gas and the felon. He activated his targeting command. He watched Emil, behind the smashed pumps, leap onto his bike and jam it into gear. The engine roared to life. Emil gave it the gun. The bike moved some 5 feet when it hit a small tributary of swirling gasoline and swerved wildly. Emil screamed as the bike angled towards its side, skidding madly. He felt his pants absorb a spray of gasoline as the bike slid furiously towards the lit cigarette he had dropped moments before. The cigarette lay, still smouldering, 18 inches in front of Robo's foot. The bike continued to slide towards it. A river of gasoline rushed in the same direction. With a Herculean effort, Emil jammed his foot on the ground and, his ankle screaming with pain, got the bike into an upright position. Miraculously, the bike hit a patch of dry asphalt and leaped forward. Emil held on for dear life, maneuvering the bike out of the path of the flooding fuel. Robo, noticing the cigarette, placed a firm foot on the burning butt, smashing it just before a torrent of gas rushed up and over his shoe. Robo stood there, silently. A second passed. He realized he had gotten to the cigarette 1.3 seconds too late. The air around him exploded into flame. The puddles of fuel ignited with a deafening roar, sending roaring fireballs 100 feet in the air. "So long, officer!" Emil cackled. His laughter eroded into rasping gasps of fear as he noticed a fireball skidding across the wet pavement, heading right for his bike. He gunned the engine, keeping the bike 10 feet away from the horizontal wall of flame trailing him. In the center of the inferno, a blackened armored figure turned and watched Emil speed away. Robo stared through the inferno, once again activating his targeting command. Slowly, carefully, Robo marched out of the flames. Surrounded by thick, black smoke, he peered out of the fog and locked his vectors on the fleeing punk. Raising a still flaming arm, Robo fired his Auto-9. Emil felt a sharp pain at the base of his elbow. He glanced down at his arm as an exit wound the size of a grapefruit appeared. He lost control of the bike immediately and flipped onto the hard, dry macadam. Emil felt the wound alert all his pain centers. The night sky suddenly seemed like daylight, illuminated by the conflagration at the station. A large, shadowy figure loomed above him. The being before him looked like a creature from Hades itself. He watched as two smouldering steel hands made their way down towards his neck. They grabbed his lapels and yanked him up. He felt his bladder give way. He was nearly in tears. Things were not going his way tonight. He rose past a pair of fire-blackened legs, a charred torso. He found himself gazing into the inhuman eyes of Robocop. Robo activated a record command. He didn't know why, but this man was important to him. He wanted this down in his memory banks for retrieval. Emil was getting giddy. He was flying like a bird. Robo angled the man's head before his recording eyes. Full face, left profile, right profile, all stored on videotape. Emil giggled into the Titan's face. You're dead, man! You're a nightmare! The ground beneath Robo shook as the underground storage tanks to the station exploded with a roar. Emil stared at the undead devil before him. Behind the monster cop, a titanic fireball erupted high into space. It looked to Emil as if it would reach the stars. Emil watched as the fireball blasted past the shell sign. The sign exploded in a violent shower of sparks. One of the letters careened off into the night. The charred monster cop loomed before Emil. Behind him, a neon sign sputtered spasmodically. Hell. Emil grinned at the apparition. Who are you? Robo demanded. Emil shrugged and laughed. Robo realized that the diminutive thug was of no further use to him. He dropped the little man onto the ground and marched, still smoldering, to the turbo cruiser. He didn't bother to radio his report in. He figured, by now, half the neighborhood knew there was something definitely wrong at the local gas station. He switched on the ignition of the turbo cruiser. He had found a clue to a puzzle he did not comprehend. Yet something within him was driving him to push onward to discover... what? He didn't know. He just had a feeling about all this. He tilted his head oddly. He had a feeling.